Across the country, mortgage deals on offer yesterday have been withdrawn today. When the offers are back on the table, you'll be paying more, for some close to double the previous fixed rate. In all, some 18 companies have withdrawn mortgage deals, and the list is being added to all the time.
We're paying just over £1,000 at the moment on our mortgage, and it's looking like it's going to go up by 400 at least, but every time we look, every time we check, it looks like it's going up even more.
Eve Ainsworth from Crawley is coming out of a fixed-term mortgage and isn't sure where she'll find the money to pay for a new one.
It's really worrying, it's scary, and it's scary because there's no reassurance. It just feels like everything's escalating and there's absolutely no control out there.
Kwasi Kwarteng told City investors this morning he was now in daily contact with the Governor of the Bank of England. And all eyes in the city were hanging on a juddering live stream at lunchtime. The Bank of England chief economist tried to reassure markets there would be a bigger than usual interest rate rise in November.
I think it's hard not to draw the conclusion that all this will require a significant monetary policy response. Let me leave it there.
Hugh Pell welcomed the government clarifying it still believed in independent audit of its work, implying that wasn't at all clear last week.
Well, I still think the overall strategy is absolutely right, so I'm still a firm believer of Trussonomics.
Julian Jessup is one of the economists close to Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. He thinks they overloaded last week's mini-budget.
I think there were a couple of missteps on Friday and over the weekend. One was the decision to pre-announce the cuts in income tax, both the basic rate and the higher rate from next year. I think that could have waited until the next fiscal event, which we now know is going to be in November. And the second was the Chancellor confirming over the weekend that he's planning more tax cuts to come, which sounded like he's turning a deaf ear to the concerns in the markets.
At the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, Sir Keir Starmer said recent days proved the Tories had lost the mantle of economic competence.
What we've seen in the past few days has no precedent. The government has lost control of the British economy. And for what? They've crashed the pound. And for what? Higher interest rates, higher inflation, higher borrowing. And for what? Not for you, not for working people, for tax cuts for the richest 1% in our society. Don't forget, don't forgive. The only way to stop this is with a Labour government. They used to lecture us about fixing the roof when the sun was shining. But take a look around Britain. They haven't just failed to fix the roof. They've ripped out the foundations, smashed through the windows, and now they've blown the doors off for good measure.
Have the markets rejected Trussonomics, Prime Minister?
The Prime Minister was spotted putting in some preparations for her own party conference near Parliament. But her opening economic gambit has created a situation where, while the German government can borrow for 5 years at an interest rate of 2%, Greece and Italy can borrow at about 4%. They're all less than the UK government, borrowing at nearly 4.5%. It might not look very different, but it adds billions to the government's bills. The pound ended up roughly where it started the day, but currency markets think it has many rocky days ahead.
Investors are still highly worried about what this government is going to do with borrowing and with the outlook for debt.
And you think we'll see more of that because markets just aren't convinced the government's numbers add up?
I think that's exactly right. Investors are not convinced.
But in recent days, the focus has shifted to the price of borrowing. The market's predictions of where they think interest rates will end up already feeding into the mortgage market and real lives.
Well, as we've been hearing, the economic crisis is already hitting home for those looking to secure a mortgage. In the days since the government's mini-budget, hundreds of products have vanished from the market as lenders prepare for a volatile future of higher interest rates. Our economics reporter Neil MacDonald joins me now. Neil, explain why mortgage products are disappearing.
Well, the people who lend you the money for a mortgage have to raise those funds themselves. And they do that from savers or from the financial markets. Now, of course, when they're doing a fixed rate mortgage, they're lending you money at a fixed rate for a number of years. So they're very sensitive to the interest rate that they themselves might be paying. Now, last Friday, the Chancellor announced the biggest tax cuts in half a century. And the financial markets judge that that will increase inflation. And they think the Bank of England will raise interest rates to bring that inflation under control. So interest rate expectations have absolutely shot up, hitting 6% next summer. And in that situation, mortgage lenders are withdrawing their own products while they think about whether they need to change their own rates.
So what will higher interest rates mean for those mortgage payments, those monthly payments?
Well, there is a big shock coming for many people. Now, about 6.5 million households in the UK are on fixed rate deals, so they're insulated from current changes in interest rates. But of course, those deals will come to an end, and when that happens, they will face the full effect. The city firm Capital Economics has looked at a household taking out a £186,000 mortgage for 2 years last autumn. Right now, their interest rate will be 1.2%, and they'll be making monthly payments of £620. On current trends, when that deal ends next September, the interest rate could shoot up to 6.6%, and they'd be paying about £1,100 a month. That would mean that they'd be paying about £6,000 a year extra. Now, that's a stark example, but it does give you a sense of the enormous difference that this could make to some people.
So, I mean, that's pretty terrifying, but what is it going to do to the economy, briefly?
Well, this is another big squeeze on people's incomes. You know, after energy, food, petrol, this one could be even bigger. And for some households, it will simply wipe out the gain from government tax cuts. So that household I was just talking about, where their mortgage payments could go up by £6,000 a year, the amount they'd gain from the cut in income tax from national insurance would be about £900 a year. I think the real danger here is that the government's strategy is based on boosting economic growth by cutting taxes, but that could be simply completely cancelled out by more expensive mortgages.
Neil, thanks very much.